apologize.
Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. It is 10:03 a.m. Written public comment may be received up to 2 hours in advance of the meeting and will be distributed to the Board of County Commissioners. Action may be taken at this meeting. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm a commissioner. We have Chair Ty Menser and Vice Chair Wayne Fournier joining us via Zoom. And we are expecting Commissioner Rachel Grant as well as Commissioner Emily Klaus to join us here momentarily. We have to amend this morning's agenda, and I did not introduce, we also have the county manager, Leonard Hernandez, as well as our assistant county managers, Jennifer Walker and Joshua Cummings. We do have a lengthy agenda, but we'd have to amend it. County manager, do you want to give an update on the executive session?
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Yeah, this item is still being worked on with our outside legal counsel and our internal PAO. There's some final details being worked out. In addition, the outside counsel did come down with the flu. So we are asking to amend this and we'll postpone it, have it come back after summer recess.
Thank you so much. So is there a motion to amend the agenda to remove the executive session?
I move to amend the agenda, remove the executive session, and proceed with the agenda as described by County Manager.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so the executive session will be moved to the next appropriate date.
Commissioner, we did receive a note from Commissioner Grant that she is planning to attend. Her TBD meeting was running a bit late,
okay,
but she's en route and will join us remotely until she can be here in person.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the update. Okay, next is on the agenda is the integrated water, One Water presentation, and we have staff.
Thank you so much, staff, for being prepared. And I want to start by giving thanks to our commissioners for the idea about us as a county convening a conversation around the importance of water and working with our stakeholders. Since that direction that was provided, staff have been working diligently to put that framework together. They also received a grant I'll let them talk a little bit about that we were able to report out to the board. And this is an update on that conversation and for us to look at how that conversation is taking place, next steps as we look to move this conversation into touch points with the community. With that, I'll turn over to Ashley and they can introduce themselves.
Yeah, well, thank you and good morning, commissioners. As the county manager highlighted, CPED did receive a grant that the board heard about in September of last year. And since then, this grant essentially is going to accelerate the county's work and for the region as it relates to integrated water resources, and in particular propel actions that the League of Women Voters highlighted in their recent water study, as well as all the watershed planning work that's been done. I am very excited to be joined here today by Derek Day, who is the new manager of community planning in CPED, my old position. He is overseeing our water and climate monitoring section, as well as all the environmental planning that's happening at the county and the comprehensive plan update, which means you're going to see a lot more of him in the coming months. He does come to us from the Department of Ecology, where he spent, was it 10 years working on Puget Sound recovery planning efforts?
Feels like forever.
Okay. And of course, you probably recognize him and know him because he was on our planning commission and served as the chair. So I'm going to turn it over to Derek and am here to really just provide historical context.
All right. Thank you, folks. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This is a project that I'm actually really excited about. This came before I got here, but I was actually working on issues directly related to this before I got here. And this project is the kind of project that made me really, really excited to come to the county. Because this kind of work, it might sound a little bit silly, but it's really progressive. Not a lot of counties are doing this kind of work to deliberately integrate their work around common issues. That way. Okay, so Ashley mentioned a little bit that we got a grant from the Department of Commerce. This grant was actually a collaboration between the team that I used to work for and the Department of Commerce. So it was a Puget Sound recovery and salmon recovery focused grant program. And we were able to get $177,000 from the Department of Commerce to develop this One Water framework and start to build out One Water programming at Thurston County. We got the grant in kind of the end of September of 2024, and we've been working on it since then. One of the things we do want to note is we are changing the name from One Water to Integrated Water based on stakeholder feedback. They preferred that name. But one thing to note here also is that integrating programmatic integration is actually a top-line Puget Sound recovery strategy. It's recognized that that is something that will really help us optimize the work that happens in Puget Sound. So this is also a really big Puget Sound recovery priority, which is why the Puget Sound Strategic Initiative leads collaborated with the Department of Commerce to fund this program. So some of the money comes from the State Climate Commitment Act. Some of the money in that program comes from the National Estuary Program that's funded through EPA.
So Derek, calling out integrated puts us in a better position for future resources potentially?
It could, in that I think our partners like it better, and partners are always better when you're trying to chase money. So water is really complex. It operates on the landscape in a very integrated way. Water, our lakes, our streams, our rivers, they're all connected. Our groundwater is connected. It's integrated on its own. What's not as integrated is the way that we manage water. Over time, this is a natural thing. Authorities and programs build up, and as they mature, they get closer and closer together, and you start to really see that overlap develop over time. So we have water that's integrated, and we have programs that work close to each other. They often work together. But we manage stormwater, we work on wastewater, we have drinking water, we have issues around public access to water, clean water for people, clean water for fish. Our transportation systems are connected to our water systems. We have a lot of infrastructure to manage water that builds up over time with those increasing authorities and mandates that come down from the state. And what it looks like when you start to manage water in a county is, of course, this is probably no news to anybody, but if you look at an issue like hydrology, so that's how the water moves through the landscape. There are all sorts of connected issues that we work on as a county that we're responsible for, that we care about, that our constituents care about. Those could look like our treaty obligations. Those could look like access to water. Those could look like climate. And we have programs that all touch these, and they are essentially concentric around some of these issues. It's really a team sport. So why integrated water? I would say the community and the water doesn't really care what department you come from. So if we're able to handle water in a more integrated way, we can see a lot of benefits. So we all have different roles. Each program has a different mission. Each one might have different authorities. We have different staff. It's a really complicated system. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. And if we integrate our water management deliberately, we can recognize some opportunities there and some benefits. So those could look like different data sharing agreements between departments, making sure that we're not duplicating some of the information that we're gathering. We could be doing integrated monitoring work, building out bigger kind of programmatic schedules, if you will. It allows us to align around multi-benefit investments. So there are things that might be happening in the roads world that impact stormwater that impact our treaty obligations. And when we can find those types of opportunities, we can provide more value. It also allows us to speak with one voice as a county, so we can plan together, we can communicate together. We can also, and I think this one's really, really important. Our work that we do as a county, we have a certain amount of authority, but we all work in these big watersheds with a lot of partners. We have tribes, we have cities, we have nonprofits that we work with. And when we have an integrated water program, we can interface with our external partners really smoothly. And that is going to be really, really important as things like climate change and water availability and the stormwater requirements and their interface with growth management in the cities. It really allows us to play a really proactive role and be able to interface really smoothly with our partners. It also just allows sharing. So the diversity in the programs is probably it's about the same as the diversity in the expertise that we have at the county. And there are tons of opportunities to share both practices and experience and knowledge across our programs. It's also a good way to get your institutional knowledge really solidified. That's a challenge in any organization. You have people who have 20, 30 years worth of institutional knowledge. If you can get that downloaded into the programs, you can really do a lot better over time. Okay, so the grant that we got, it really has two primary components. There's an internal component and then there's an external component of the grant work that we signed up for. So the internal work really revolves around this idea that we can do an assessment and come up with recommendations around how well we are integrated and what we might be able to do to integrate more deeply across our programs. So that looks like we've stood up an internal work group, interdepartmental work group, and we're working to compile data about some of our processes and programs. And then the plan is to develop an audit tool. So we can actually really get a clear look at how we're working together, where it's working, where we have opportunities. And that audit will culminate in a report. It's not a big scary audit where people look through all of your receipts and tax records. It's really more of just creating a picture for ourselves. With the external component, like I mentioned before, and I don't think I can emphasize this enough, the interface with our external partners is just as important as the internal work that we'll be doing. So we're working to reach out to other partners. Like I mentioned, these could be tribes, these could be the local integrating organization, this could be our cities. But those partners, we really want to get their input on what our programs look like so we can help build that smooth interface. We also want to be able to look at where are the gaps regionally, and then conduct an analysis and a report. The grant itself is really intended to, again, give us that picture of what's working, come up with recommendations, and the goal here is really to follow that through its conclusion if we can. So timeline. So the project started in fall 2024. We're working right now on the audit component of the grant and building out the tool so that we can actually get that picture of what we're doing. Later on, we're going to be moving on to more direct outreach with our partners. Like I mentioned before, that could be like lead entities, that could be tribes, cities, other folks who work on water as well. And then really to have that gap analysis ready in the fall of 2025. So I talked a little bit about this, but we've got our internal next steps. Really kicking off the project, getting it moving, rolling is one of our next steps. The interdepartmental work group, standing that up and getting that into kind of a regular business cycle, and then onboarding a consultant who will help with that audit. We have our external next steps as well. We want to bring this out to salmon recovery lead entities and watershed planning units. We also intend to build a kind of a full-fledged engagement plan for our external partners beyond just kind of that initial outreach. The consultant, again, plays an important role here. And then we want to be able to share what we've developed as far as literature and assessments and really help guide what we do as a county and how we work.
I will say one sort of even more forward-looking next step is hopefully getting funding for future phases. The way the grant was structured, there was really only enough to fund sort of this technical component of phase one, and then we are, fingers crossed, hoping that this grant program exists into 2026, and we'll be able to follow up on the success of this phase with funding for future phases.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
I guess I have a comment. I want to thank you for all of your work on this, and also want to thank Commissioner Mejia for kind of championing this project as well. This is really exciting. I remember when we first started discussing this last year. I'm sure it was discussed prior to that, but I remember, when I first started, we had this discussion early 2024, and it was something that seemed really exciting. And now kind of seeing the feasibility of it right in front of us is something I'm really looking forward to, like getting through the first phase and kind of moving on and seeing what comes to fruition after all of this work. So thank you. I really appreciate all your work on this. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
Commissioner Menser?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited, and I wanted to just say that the slide about like what the benefits are that Derek went through, it sounds kind of technical, and it's going to help, bureaucracy sort of thing. But this can really have if we do this right, or if you don't do it right, the consequences can be very stark and impactful to a community in a couple different directions, or more than a couple actually. But just to give folks an example, I mean, you don't want to run out of water because you're doing one thing in one department and you're not being mindful of what's happening somewhere else. At the same time, you don't want a court telling you what you can and can't do as a community trying to plan your future, which is kind of what happened in the Hearst case, where there was building permits being issued with permit exempt wells, and there was water quantity data that wasn't being considered, and folks sued, and then the Supreme Court came in and told that county what it could do until the legislature worked on a fix for that, and then we have the whole Stream Flow Restoration Act apparatus. But for a long time there, everyone was panicking because counties were planning for their future in one place, but because they hadn't been mindful of what was going on in another place of their own shop, they ended up with a moratorium on building and development and different things, which, whether that needs to happen or not, no county wants to have that come like a nuclear bomb from the Supreme Court when property owners have plans. And I mean, you need to plan for something like that. So you need to see all that stuff coming, plan for it, and be strategic about it. And that's what hopefully these tools will help us to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Fournier?
Yeah, I like what I'm hearing, so I kind of stand in favor of continuing to move forward. This is a complex issue, and for a million different reasons, I really appreciated the way that Derek kind of went over slide 3 and just talked about how as different aspects of organizations grow, you get the overlap, and then it increases complexity, and the idea of integration, I hope, will make things simpler. And so I'm hopeful, and I like what I'm hearing. So thank you, staff.
I'm not seeing any additional hands, so I guess I'll comment. I'm so excited. This has been something that I know I've talked about with Commissioner Menser for many years. And before us, there was Art Starry, who was talking about this in public health, and Kevin and CPED. And And so just to see it like at this level now, having that grant, is very exciting because I saw a little bit of, you know, what this coordination can do when we had the Three Lakes presentation, and it was public health and public works and CPED, and they were all presenting on this study that they've done. And it was like, well, that's what we really need to start doing even more when we're talking about water, not just on the Three Lakes, but like on a county level. And I'm very hopeful about just seeing the next steps. It's very exciting. We have a representative from the Salmon Recovery Council on here, Commissioner Menser, and so I know he'll be very excited to promote this on that level. Right, Commissioner Menser? Thumbs up. But I just want to go back to, you know, my excitement aside, is the consultant work, and how will that work? Is that going to be, like, I guess it's like, what are you looking for in a consultant? Who are you going to bring in? Has that been kind of vetted out? Where are we at on that process?
So at this point, we're really on a short timeline. We have the state biennium coming up, and some of the money turns back into a pumpkin at the biennium. We were under the impression early on that they would actually be able to find some ways to help move money across bienniums, but we aren't. But we're talking to a couple teams that we have on really similar contracts, that we might be able to do contract amendments so we can move quickly.
But the skills they would bring is a mixture of facilitation, community engagement, because that's a really important piece, as well as technical skills, particularly in the area of water resources.
Yeah.
Specifically, there are some consultants that we work with who have whole water governance teams.
And I think there's also, you know, that's really good to hear. Can I ask a little bit more about that timeline? And is there, so when does this grant that we got, when does it end? And then, yeah, I'll start with that one.
So the first phase is through June 30th.
Okay.
And
oh, very short. Okay.
Yep, subsequent phases. So, yep.
Yeah,
It's
and
quick.
one of the grant was actually written to support staff hours as well. So we have been billing to it, and we have gotten, you know, we have been gathering information or whatnot. Now we're just kind of turning it over. But yeah, that's why we are looking to move as quickly as possible. It has taken quite a long time to negotiate with the state to get the grant signed and their lead grant person switched, and so we started getting a different answer as of 2 months ago.
Thank you. And so does the second phase of that, will we get the same amount of money, or is it the same?
We would need to reapply.
Okay.
I believe there was money from the state in that program. It comes from the Climate Commitment Act.
Okay.
We've been very successful though, so there are other grants that we've applied for that, fingers crossed, we'll be able to share good news with the board soon.
No, I was very excited when we were able to get that first grant and get a lot of this work funded, because it was right at the B where the league also released their water study, and we had county staff go in and present with other jurisdictions on, you know, what we were doing in terms of water, and hearing the county present on that was very exciting. I think there was a lot of excitement in the room, and so there's a lot of support for this kind of work in the community.
In some of the work, I would like to highlight the pieces that are moving forward and that you'll get to hear more about when we start doing all of the presentations on the comprehensive plan update is all of the water work. I mean, I think that is probably some of the most progressive things the Planning Commission and the community have been working on to, you know, integrate is part of the larger community vision and really set out an implementation plan of what that looks like. So we didn't necessarily wait to bring a consultant on board to start weaving this into all of the other planning efforts that were already underway.
Thank you. Any additional comments, questions? Okay. Anything else? Anything from us? No? Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Next on our agenda is the Thurston County Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, CEMC, the 2025 update.
Good morning. Good morning. Ben Miller-Todd, Director of Emergency Services. Thank you for having us this morning. I have the pleasure of introducing a couple members of our team at Emergency Management, Brandon Cheney and also Kyle Busted, and they're going to be respectively presenting the next two presentations. I will say from my perspective, this is where I get to be an incredibly proud director in terms of the work and energy that's been placed in updating our comprehensive emergency management plan and all the different jurisdictions and touch points that this plan entails throughout our entire community, both internally and externally. And so I'm going to hand it over to Brandon to give that update to you this morning.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'm Brandon Cheney. I am a coordinator with emergency management and was the lead project manager for the comprehensive emergency management plan update, which we were working very diligently on basically all of 2024. So I'm presenting to you guys the fruits of our labor and going to give you guys a little more information about what the comprehensive emergency management plan is. I'm hoping to leave from this briefing today having provided you guys enough information to make an informed decision on moving forward with a resolution to adopt these changes to our emergency plan. For those that weren't around during our last update to the comprehensive emergency management plan back in 2021, it is a plan that we are required by state law to develop and maintain. Washington State Emergency Management Division, part of the military department, requires us to do an update every 5 years of this plan in order to maintain eligibility for preparedness grant funding, among other requirements. So first off, what exactly is the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan? The best way to describe it is it's both a strategic and an operational plan. More importantly, what it is not is a tactical level plan that gets into the details of how things are done, but instead it describes, what actions should be done before, during, and after a disaster. It guides our county government with that. The plan is applicable to all county offices, departments, agencies, and it also applies to all of our stakeholders and cooperating agencies that work and interface with us to help with disaster preparedness and disaster response. So, a couple of ways that this plan is used and implemented. The first, as a strategic plan, the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan outlines, what plans we should develop and maintain. It describes our emergency management program at a county level overall, and it helps guide us in what other emergency plans we need to develop and maintain. As an operational plan, it also serves as our county's emergency response operations plan where it needs to be. There are specific critical components within this plan that outline very specific detailed procedures on what we do in the event of emergency disaster, One to highlight is how a disaster is declared or proclaimed by the county, and kind of what that means. And then also how we activate staff and operate our emergency coordination center during large-scale incidents. One of the best ways to describe the plan or analogy I like to use is think of the comprehensive emergency management plan as like a Rolodex. It's a Rolodex of people, organizations, and other emergency plans. And so this is sort of the first plan you can go to if you have a question regarding emergency preparedness or emergency response about, what agencies or organizations should I be interfacing with or contacting, and what plans would apply to this particular situation or whatever this disaster or emergency is. So the CEMP, as being that Rolodex or plan of plans, is broken up into several tiers. So the top you have the base plan, and that is what we would consider the overarching policy and procedures on how the county operates its emergency management programs. Supporting the base plan, you have what we call emergency support function annexes or functional annexes. And those go into more detail about specific agency responsibilities and describing, what organizations are responsible for taking on what roles during a disaster or an emergency. Further down, as needed, emergency support function annexes will have what we call appendices or attachments. And those are more standard operating procedures developed by those agencies, checklists, maps, other data points, and other job aids that sort of help describe how those agencies are going to accomplish what they're responsible for during an emergency or a disaster. Bringing it further down, the base plan there on the left of the slide, breaks it down into 8 different chapters. Each chapter describes sort of what we would consider a core function of emergency management, and sort of universally applied, whatever the threat, hazard, or disaster may be. These are the things that we'll always operate under during an emergency or a disaster. To the right there are those emergency support function annexes. There are 15 of them. This is modeled after the federal national response framework, and aligns with the state's comprehensive emergency management plan and how the federal government organizes to respond to disasters as well. And so each functional annex covers a specific emergency service or group of emergency services that may be required during a disaster. So the takeaway from this is that the base plan is always applied regardless of what the threat, hazard, or incident might be, but emergency support function annexes are utilized on an as-needed basis depending on what the impacts from a disaster or situation may be. So a couple of highlights. We did do a fairly significant update to the plan, but a couple of ones that we wanted to highlight is first, the state by law does provide a review and evaluation of our plan when we submit it for update. This update iteration cycle, we got basically a 95% on a report card from the military department on sort of the completeness and thoroughness of our plan, giving us a 4 out of 5 rating, which is a stark improvement from our previous plan update. I think it was at 80%, so we saw a pretty significant increase. And then to give it a little more context, the state's sort of benchmark for counties for their plans is 75%. So we're well above the mark with this plan update from the state's perspective. A couple of other things we really wanted to emphasize in this plan update was updating our threat hazard risk assessment. We had just finished our natural hazard mitigation plan the year prior to this, and we wanted to make sure we incorporated the most current data available to us of what different threats and hazards may impact our county. And then also, another large point of emphasis for this plan is we really wanted to help offices and departments get a better idea of what their roles and responsibilities are in the plan. The previous plan, when we were reviewing it, felt it was a little too vague on explaining how every agency and organization sort of works together in a disaster. And then another point of emphasis is we really wanted to take that whole government approach or whole community approach. And so you'll see later on in the presentation, a large list of stakeholders we engaged continuously throughout this plan update process. So you'll see there that this wasn't just an effort by emergency management. Throughout the entire process, we had multiple work groups put together from various disciplines and backgrounds, some government, some non-government, and some nonprofit, to really have that whole community approach, whole government approach to kind of finding that best solution of how we're going to do emergency management and coordinate emergency response here in the county. So the plan is available. The draft versions are available online. It is considered a public document. So if you go onto our website, our emergency management page, under emergency plans, you'll be able to see both the current plan there on the webpage as well as a dedicated page for the plan update. On that project page, we have draft versions of the entire updated plan for the public to review at their leisure and for any other stakeholders to review and provide commentary on. Once the update is adopted and approved, it will replace the existing plan and still live with copies on our website, as well as be distributed to key stakeholder agencies and other partners as part of the plan implementation. So once the plan is adopted, emergency management will maintain the plan and will support county offices and departments with implementing all of those, responsibilities and policy guidelines that are contained within the plan. Department head and executive heads do have responsibilities within the comprehensive emergency management plan to coordinate with emergency management to kind of help with the implementation of not just how to prepare for disasters, but, be ready to organize that response when there is something such as a wildfire that quickly develops and we kind of need to take action right away. Emergency management, as part of our regular duties, we also facilitate regular upkeep of the plan. We continuously, for example, monitor legislation, and any significant changes in policy or legislation would have us look back at the plan and see if we need to make any out-of-cycle changes to keep the plan current. So next steps is once the board feels they have enough information to make a decision, have had enough time to review all the updates to the plan, the next steps will be moving to adopt through resolution the updates to the comprehensive emergency management plan. The alternate is, of course, if you feel you need more information from us, we can do a follow-on work session. But I hope our presentation and any questions we can answer today will kind of equip you guys with enough information to make that decision. After adoption, we'll proceed with implementing the plan. That will include distributing it to those offices, departments, key stakeholder agencies, as well as making the final approved version available for public review at their leisure on our website.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I just have one thing. Kyle Bustad, Emergency Management Manager. I super proud of our team. When Brandon and I sat down end of last year, end of 2023, and because we knew we had to update the CMP, we were up. We could review it, change names, update contact numbers, and we'd meet the requirements of the plan update. We talked through it and decided we're gonna update the entire plan. We're gonna look at every bit of it. And only with one raised eyebrow did Brandon say, all right. It was an all hands on deck. Every one of the emergency management coordinators touched every bit of this plan. And everybody had some aspect in coordinating with our partners and our stakeholders and making sure that we had a usable, viable, relevant document that wasn't just a checkbox to sit on a shelf. So I'm super proud of our team. We would not have been successful as we are. A lot of jurisdictions will hire contractors, hire consultants, $15,000 to update their CMP. We did it in-house. I'm super proud of that. And it would not have been successful if it had not been a full team effort and with Brandon managing up and down. I will say that in our weekly one-on-ones, there were a couple of times where Brandon would say, all right, well, I just have just one more person to make a comment or edit and review on, and then we'll be done with this section. And I would say, cool, okay, great. Just let me know if you have any issues. And who is it, by the way? And he's like, well, you. So I appreciate the managing up and down, and we would not have been as successful if it had not been for Brandon's effort. So
fantastic. And the bigger why also is then in service to our community, right? So our readiness and be able to respond. And
yes.
Fantastic.
So you've gotten 2 thumbs up, both from Commissioner Fournier and Commissioner Menser online. I just have one question in terms of once you're presenting this, earlier this year, there was a conversation, and possibly Commissioner Grant remembers, where there was a conversation about emergency management and the Thurston Regional Planning Council, right? And, you know, I made a comment of like, there should be, you know, you should contact our emergency management team at the county. And I made that point several times. And so I think a presentation to the Thurston Regional Planning Council, once it's adopted and kind of look at all the different sectors might be beneficial since there are partners from the whole region there. And just a recommendation if that wasn't on your list.
Oh, that's a great recommendation, and it's something we've actually made ourselves available to do throughout the plan process. For example, I went to ORS, the Olympia Amateur Radio Society. I went to their dinner, dine-in meeting and gave a presentation on this as well. So yes, that is something within our purview to go to various groups and stakeholders and sort of have sort of a roadshow presentation about what this plan is.
And thank you for being our champion and throwing our name out there. We're happy to. Yeah, would love to.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, but you're still with us for the next item.
Yeah.
No, now that the presentation's done, I'll make one slight joke. I have to make one joke. Of all the technical language that was just used in that presentation and everything that goes into EM, I think I was most concerned about needing to describe at some point a Rolodex.
That's funny.
I
was picking up what he was putting down.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the Incident Command System, ICS training.
I'm going to jump in just very quickly. Just to tie these two together, and the reason that we're doing these back to back is really that we have a CEMP to really define or create a blueprint, as Brandon just described, on how we respond to disasters. But a key piece to this entire system is also the policy in which is made during disasters and how we create policy groups and how senior and elected individuals respond to and coordinate to best support the community that they serve. Really, when we're talking through that process, there's what is an incident command structure that is really defined and really helps to relate to what's the immediate response that is really well turnkey, kind of ironed out how do we immediately respond. But then with every single disaster, one of the first concerns that comes up throughout that process is not every single disaster can be defined. You cannot sit there and devise a plan specifically for every single disaster. And so with that, we need a group of policymakers to help in those instances as we tease it out and get through that initial response, what is the policy direction in which we're going to head. And understanding and having just a conceptual understanding over emergency management, the incident command structure, also plays a role in many of the requirements that we have for grant funding as well, to make sure each and every one of you are trained in that process. Kyle has done a wonderful job, and I'm going to hand it over to him in streamlining this training this morning. And please feel free to ask any questions that you have, but this is really intended for your training as senior elected officials when we do have disaster responses and what those priorities might be and kind of those roles. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Kyle.
Can I ask one question? Since this is more of a training format, would you prefer questions during the presentation or after?
You can ask during, I'm good with that, yeah.
So, commissioners, if you have questions, just.
Thanks, Ben. No pressure. Kyle Bustad, Emergency Management Manager. Now, let's say typically this is a 4 to 4.5 hour session, and we are, I really enjoy you and I like you as my commissioners, and so we're only gonna do this for about half an hour, I promise. Because we receive federal funding through Homeland Security and FEMA, we have a requirement, there's training requirements for activation for people that work in the Emergency Coordination Center, Emergency Operations Center, for those that respond to an incident. Because we receive those federal funds, this requirement is for all agencies. So Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, counties, everybody that receives those federal funding from Homeland Security has to go through some type of training depending on the level of your response. Luckily for you, you are senior elected officials, so you get the senior elected officials.
I have done this, it is hours and hours and hours.
So I'm gonna talk about Incident Command System, typically called ICS. Now it's an all hazards approach that it's a system that allows you to respond to an incident regardless of size, complexity, jurisdiction. So I can go work at an EOC in Massachusetts and understand how they operate based off of ICS. An on-scene response is very similar to how we activate in the Emergency Coordination Center because of ICS. We're speaking the same language. We have the same structures, the same procedures. There is a flow that is followed through ICS, and this allows multiple jurisdictions, multiple departments, multiple agencies, multiple disciplines to coordinate and collaborate together. So when it's chaos, when it's a disaster, that's one less thing that we don't have to figure out. There's 5 major functions we're going to talk about, like positions, buckets, we'll call them, command, operations, plans, logistics, and finance and administration. So the legal basis for ICS, the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5 was released in 2003, and it mandated that we need to prepare for domestic incidents in national preparedness and response. We need to have a set system. And out of that came Presidential Directive 8 from President Obama that said we need to have national preparedness, and we need to have an ability to have a coordinated response to any kind of incident, whether it be man-made or a natural hazard. And so that's where this came out, the National Response Framework, which Brandon mentioned, where the emergency support functions, those buckets of like transportation and communication and public works, and that came out of the National Response Framework. And then also out of the National Response Framework came NIMS, the National Incident Management System. So if we think of the National Response Framework is the policy, where the NIMS is the procedures. It's the how we're going to carry out our response, and this is where ICS came from. This is where it's embedded. This is where it says the planning section, the planning person is going to do these types of activities, operations is going to do these types of activities. It provides a systematic approach to disaster response. So, any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
So what is defined as a domestic incident, and who defines that once we are, who has the authority to define that we are in a domestic incident?
Yeah, domestic is, it is inside the United States. Now, we know that, we don't know that. There is sometimes a conflict on the determination of a terrorist event. Typically, it's defined by FBI or DHS. There is a federal definition of a terrorist event, which includes political, I forget the wording, but there is a defined event. For us, it would typically come from FBI or State Patrol, which would then trickle through the Washington State Emergency Management Division down to the counties and the cities.
Thank you.
All right, so emergency management. What we do, besides just being all around amazing, is we plan, organize, coordinate, implement strategies to manage, mitigate the impacts of emergencies and disasters. So basically, we are trying to look at all the potential impacts that we would have on the community, on government, and how do we mitigate those? How do we prepare for those? And then we write plans on how we would respond and recover from them. So our ultimate goal is to support a community's ability to prevent, respond to, and recover from disasters. We do this in multiple ways. Through risk assessments, so we look at the types of hazards and disasters we could potentially face. And it's not only the obvious hazards like floods or windstorms, earthquakes, it is also those cascading impacts. For example, if there's a lahar off of Mount Rainier, it won't necessarily devastate, the lahar itself won't devastate Thurston County, but what will happen are, there's a lot of people in the Pierce County area that are going to evacuate, right? And where are they gonna go? A lot of them are gonna come here. So what we have to think about is those mass care situations. How do we then take care of those people that are evacuating from a large lahar? So we look at all of those different hazards that we could potentially face. Planning, training and exercise, resource management, mutual aids, make sure that on blue sky days that we're looking at how we can develop MOAs and MOUs, not only with other government organizations and nonprofits, but also the private sector. Community engagement is really big for us, so we try really hard to make sure we get the residents of Thurston County prepared and as informed and knowledgeable and prepared as we can be. And then a big part of ours is crisis communication, alert and warning, so TC Alert. If you haven't signed up for TC Alert, please do so. It is this mass notification, so EAS, emergency alert system, wireless alerts. We practice on a regular basis. We have a duty officer that's on call 24/7, and social media, and then also recovery.
But I'm like, my brain was going like 20 miles an hour. I have a question. I don't know why. So, I don't know what my question is. Are we only having to respond to Thurston County? I guess this is where my brain is going in. I'm going to use wildfire mitigation. Wildfire. We'll use that as an example. If the wildfire happened inside the city limits, let's just pretend then would it be would have its own emergency planning response, right? Versus if it happens at Clear Lake, it's Thurston County jurisdiction. How does that work when we're coming up with these kinds of?
Yeah, I feel like that was a planted question, and I promise I did not ask you to say that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but, you know, for us, any event, any disaster, any emergency that happens in Thurston County, regardless of city or town, is an event in Thurston County. So if one of our independent emergency management organizations, Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, or Yelm, are activated, then we will also be activated in support of their efforts. Because disasters are always local, so they're going to use the resources that they have available, and then if they need additional resources, then that's when they'll reach out to us and for us to try to figure out. So for example, if there's a fire and they need another bulldozer to help with digging a fire trench or a line or something, right? And they're out of bulldozers, they'll call us and say, we need a bulldozer. And then that's our job to go into action to say, we're gonna try to find a bulldozer, right? We'll call our friends at Public Works, right? So we try to find that resource for them. So if they're activated, we're also activated. In the same way that we have strong partnerships and we work really hard to be collaborative with not only our Homeland Security Region 3, so Mason, Lewis, Pacific, and Grace Harbor, but our neighbors to the north of Pierce County, right? Like we try really hard to make sure that we're all integrated, not to use the integrated water, but to make sure that we're integrated and we're very close. We talk on a regular basis. Our plan is to do more robust training exercises together. So we're always talking and collaborating so that when something does happen, we will always be ready to support. But I danced around that, and to say that if there's a jurisdiction in Thurston County activated, then we will also be ready to support.
But as far as like the NIMS model and like the responsibility of like the activation up and down when that happens, like whose responsibility it is only when they would ask you to activate, or we would just activate?
Yeah, there is a title called Unified Command, which we will get to that slide in just a moment. But what it basically does, it allows senior elected officials, it allows multiple jurisdictions that have their own independent and recognized authority to come together to set priorities. So commissioners may go with Yelm Council, right? And those that group becomes Unified Command, which then determines where are we going to focus resources. And then that jurisdiction maintains their independence, right? But you're coming together collectively to make the decision to set priorities and also decide where resource allocations can go.
I have a question.
1 second, Commissioner Klaus. Let me get Commissioner Fournier and then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then if I could just say, so.
I'm just gonna kind of comment on Commissioner, oh, sorry.
1 second, Commissioner Fournier.
I just wanted to say, just for a time check, like this is set to be 40 minutes. It started at 10:50. Expectation will be done at 11:30, so we can make sure we get the budget piece done too.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Fournier.
Just the point that Yelm is an example. It can be very quick and very easy for an incident that's of any kind of size to get outside of, their ability. So it quickly can escalate, and there's regional teams that come in and kind of take over the management that are from multiple jurisdictions. So it just happens really quickly, really easily, and the system's built to where it's very seamless, and so it almost happens organically. But there's a lot of behind the scenes pieces that like Kyle is putting together.
Thank you. Commissioner Klaus?
Yeah, thank you. So my question is kind of going back to the definition of what a domestic emergency is, along with this concept of a unified command, which sounds like it gives a lot of authority to local elected officials. But I'm kind of curious, like, what happens if the state and the local electeds or the federal and the state, leadership disagree on what qualifies as an emergency, who would have the authority to direct, you know, what our response is here locally?
Great question. So disasters are always local. Even if a disaster will always, that doesn't mean that your normal authorities and abilities are usurped by any other broader jurisdiction like the state, unless it applies to any other standard incident. So we know that if it's a large terrorist event, it will start with our local law enforcement and then eventually get turned over to FBI, right? So they have jurisdiction in the same way that if a disaster happens, it's our responsibility. It's a local responsibility. And only at that time that we run out of resources or we need additional support will the state then step in to provide that support.
Okay. So if our local response team feels like they can handle it at the local level, do they need to, you know, bump it up to state or federal for support?
No, if we can handle it at the local level, then it stays with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give an example, like a fire may, using an example, start in the city of Yelm, but if it spreads rapidly and fast, it could, within hours, be outside of the city limits and become a much larger situation. And then they're gonna be working with other agencies to make sure the goal is to get the resources there to address the situation and to contain it as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Menser online.
Thank you. I just have probably a dumb question, but does this connect to the structures that we were working from when we did the training in Ocean Shores in 2019, and then we had follow-up sessions to work out incident command, or did this come separately from some separate national command? I'm having trouble connecting the dots.
Yeah, what I believe you were talking about is when we were doing recovery planning, and it does have a connection. It is part of emergency management, and it is part of our portfolio and our responsibilities. So yes, that was a grant, basically. It was an opportunity funded by FEMA EMI that allows to pay for a planning or an exercise of the recovery planning efforts. So there is a tie. It is one aspect of this.
If you don't mind, I think it's important to remember that the framework associated with this, when you look at the first presentation of CEMP, helps to define some of those pre-planned processes that we'll have in place, but it spans everything from preparedness to response to recovery, and then on the flip side, mitigating for future disasters as we prepare moving forward. So it's meant to be a little bit more cyclical, but to answer that question exactly, you know, what are we preparing for from Commissioner Menser? It does include that whole process in the CEMP that we heard the presentation for. So making sure that we're prioritizing just not the response, but how do we ultimately recover?
Yeah, and I'll just say that my brain's trying to connect the kind of the local jurisdictions. We did, you know, I'm NIMS certified, but for the state hospitals, and so it's like I understood what it was like from the state to the federal, and then for the state hospitals, but not from the local down. And so I'm just, you know, trying to connect those dots. Yeah. Okay.
So this is as you can see, it's hard to capture, you know, the job list of all the activities that we do. I won't read all of them to you, but I will say that it's for us, it's not about just showing up when something bad happens. It's about working year round to make sure we're ready, resilient, and responsive. And then also a lot of these things you don't always see the work, but it's always happening in the background. It's always, we try to work quietly behind the scenes to make sure that if something happens, we'll be prepared and ready. So the Emergency Coordination Center, ECC, you'll also, in the world of emergency management and in the world of government, you'll hear it called an Emergency Operations Center. Here in the county, We have the main ECC, the Emergency Coordination Center. Public Works during an event, they'll open their Emergency Operations Center in the same way that cities and towns, Yelm, Tumwater, Olympia, Lacey, they may open an EOC, which will then tie into the Emergency Coordination Center, or we'll have a direct connection. So the Emergency Coordination Center, although we're not response, we're not on the scene always, we are supporting the scene. There are aspects that we do support an incident. Right now, we are building our shelter program within the emergency disaster shelter program within the county. We have typically and historically relied on the American Red Cross, and we decided we were going to build our own shelter program. So we have worked diligently to reach out to school districts and community centers, and the fairgrounds, and we have designated these areas as shelters, and now we're building out what do these look like, the resources needed to open a shelter during a disaster. So it's super exciting, but one of our responsibilities during an incident disaster is mass care, so that sheltering, feeding, watering, making sure that those are occurring and providing resources and support to those organizations and nonprofits that can make it happen. A big part of it is situational awareness. So making sure that we gather information, we provide what is happening, what we think is going to happen, and put that in a SITREP, a situational report, and give that to our senior and elected officials to make sure that you are staying well informed. Community engagement and public information alert and warning are kind of put in together. It's important that we tell our story during an incident. It's important that residents know that we're working on their behalf. We're working to try to fill any gaps and solve whatever incident is occurring. And then also coordination and documentation. It's important that we document all of the activities that occur. So for example, the 2022 floods, we are closing that up soon, but all of the documentation has been occurring the last year, 2 years. I wasn't here. And so if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? And so it's important that we document all of our activities, which is very important. And so we work on that. And then resource needs and requests. For example, during heat events, if our day shelters need, or no, our normal shelter, not normal shelters, if our standard shelters that are open all the time, if they need resources like water or tents or something like that, then we will do our best to try to support them in that effort. So just a quick note about, there have been questions before of why the ECC wasn't activated or during an event. Like I said earlier, there's a duty officer that's on call 24/7. There's a 2-week rotation. This person is always available and does answer any requests or emails that come from state emergency management or any of our local jurisdictions or if there's an event that we know that is occurring, we'll be proactive in reaching out to that jurisdiction or those agencies to say, hey, we're available, this is our number, please let us know how we can support. So there are times if, like localized flooding, if there are no houses, if there's no one displaced, we won't activate the ECC. If there was a large power outage that had cascading effects and was going to be multi-day, then we would most likely activate the ECC. And if there is a jurisdiction in Thurston County that's activated, then we will also be activated. If they're activated, we're activated. Here's our organization chart. This is ICS standard. Now the difference between the ECC manager, this is particular to Thurston County Emergency Coordination Center, the ECC. This is very similar to incident response, where the ECC manager would be the incident commander. The ECC manager is typically filled by me as the emergency management manager. The PIO, this is the person that's telling our story. Planning, these people are the ones that are gathering data, gathering information, gathering situational awareness, and making sure that we have a good understanding of the incidents occurring and then potentially what's going to happen. what's going to happen. They do a lot of forecasting, a lot of advanced planning. So for example, if we're having a winter event where it's like 2 days of rain and on that third day it's expected to drop below freezing, that's important that we know that, right? It's important that we know that there's gonna be a lot of wet trees, a lot of wet limbs, and it's going to freeze. That means branches are gonna fall, power is going to be out. So we have to get ready and prepare for that and make sure our responders know. Our operations, these are our doers. We have 3 buckets under our operations section. Public safety, this is our fire, law, EMS. Typically we have a liaison, from one of those disciplines, one of the uniformed that are come in and act as a conduit for anything incident response. So if fire folks out in the field need a resource, then we will be able to quickly navigate that request because there will be a fire person, excuse me, in the ECC that can relay that. Our human services, this is our mass care. This is where we'll do mass care, sheltering, feeding, and mental health. It's important for during disasters, mental health. So we work really closely with PHSS, Public Health and Social Services, to make sure we have a good, robust human services section. And then our critical infrastructure, these are our wonderful folks at Public Works and PUD. Our logistics, these people are the getters. So if we need an equipment item, if we need something, these are the people that get it. They beg, borrow, steal. You don't ask, I'm too little to go to jail, so I just say they do it ethically and legally, and we're good. We don't ask questions. And then also under logistics is communications. This is where these people make sure that we have radio contact, that if there are people out in the field, we know their cell phone numbers, we know every bit of every communication support that they need. Also, our amateur radio group falls under this logistics communication section. And then our finance and admin section, these are the people that make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's, because just because it's chaotic during a disaster doesn't mean that we don't have to be good stewards of public funds. And so we try really hard to make sure that even though it is chaotic, we are making sure that we're following all county policies.
For the record, since the public's watching, we don't steal.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
We don't want public information requests.
I think the other component to look at when you're looking at that chart is the ECC manager component. When you walk into the ECC, all of our space is set up in that fashion. So many times when you're coming into training for the summer weather hazard seminar or executive seminar, you're sitting at each of those locations where we have planning, logistics, operations, and finance. And so that's how the ECC is set up to make us function a little bit more efficiently. I will also echo the importance of finance in this, in that the county and specifically emergency management and a variety of aspects throughout COVID there were a series of FEMA funds that were available. We're all aware of CARES funding and ARPA and others. To be eligible for a lot of those response components, we had to make sure when we're talking about document, that we document that accordingly to be able to recoup those funds and bring those federal dollars back in to our response components. We're very proud of how that was run. We had a significantly higher ability to recoup those funds over the course of the pandemic because of the documentation that was adhered to, the policies that were adhered to, and our financial managers, both at Public Health and EM, to be able to make sure that they were staying ahead of that game. And so those are key components in that response, is making sure that are you documenting how you're responding, but also documenting appropriately to make sure you're meeting FEMA regulations.
Excellent. And thank you, County Manager. No, we don't steal So incident timeframes, what is an incident timeframe and how will you know when the incident is over? The answer is sometimes you don't know. The incident timeframes are complex. The main event, the main earthquake, whatever it is in that moment, but the incident itself can continue for years. So it's important that you understand as you're talking to your constituents that we have to be very careful to not say success and we did it, right? If there if the event is over, but there are still people that are unhoused, if there are still people that are living in shelters, the incident is not over. So it's important to understand that incident timeframes are nuanced and complex. So this is where the Unified Command, where we were talking earlier, it is an opportunity for senior elected officials to come together as independent jurisdictions to set priorities, to say what they're going to do for that jurisdiction. I want to touch on local proclamations just to make sure. So when we are faced with emergencies, you can proclaim an emergency, and this allows some suspensions of our policies. We still continue to follow, to the best of our ability, all policies and procedures. But for example, if there's an emergency life safety, the bridge is washing out, we need to hire a contractor to put some kind of stabilization in there, but that is going to cost $26,000. It's going to cost a little bit over the initial, the amount that we would go out for bid. This allows the county to contract directly with a contractor. It suspends those contracts. Now, having said that, we know that we still have to follow up. So there is never an opportunity, or there's never a time where we don't ensure that we're still trying to meet county policy. So even if we have to, or we should, we always try to make sure that we're following county policy. But the proclamation then rolls up to the state, and it allows us to make quick expenditures. If the absence, it's on our list to talk about exercising what a board emergency session looks like to sign that proclamation. In the absence of the board, the county manager can proclaim an emergency, and then it would be either ratified or rescinded at your next board meeting. And then we go to presidential disaster declarations. When the state reaches a certain threshold, they will request a presidential declaration, which will then hopefully provide federal assistance in the form of public assistance, individual assistance, and hazard mitigation. Wrong one. So right now, the public assistance program helps us through debris removal, emergency protective measures, and restoration of eligible disaster damage publicly owned facilities. Now, in that, we have to meet a certain threshold. For the state itself, the state has to have a minimum of $15.18 million worth of damage to meet a presidential declaration. For Thurston County itself, we have to have at least $1.45 million worth of public infrastructure damage in order to become eligible for FEMA public assistance. That is as of today. We don't know what the thresholds are going to be yet. There have been talk that they're going to increase. So then the $1.45 million may be higher in order for us to meet that threshold for public assistance. But right now, as of today, that's how much damage we would have to occur to get a public declaration. Now, if we get $1.45 million worth of damage, but the state does not get at least $15.18 million, they cannot apply for a presidential declaration. So those both have to be applicable. In the same way, like the cyclone storm in November, Snohomish, King, a couple of island counties, they met the threshold, the state met the threshold, but we didn't meet the damage threshold.
And is that based on the per capita? It's based on a calculation, is that
It
right?
is.
Okay.
It is typically based off of census data that they use. Yeah, and they update it every October. Historically, they've updated it every October.
Okay.
Okay. I want to talk about your role as a senior official. I want to make sure that you understand a big part of your role is to ensure continuity of government and ensure that you provide policy support. Now, this is what you do on a daily basis. It's no different. It just means that it just may be less deliberation time and less time to talk through, and it will be sometimes hurried quickly to establish a meeting versus having longer times to talk through and walk through this stuff. So a big part of it is instilling confidence in public, in your constituents, and making sure that the story is being told, and knowing that your presence and your voice can have a calming effect on residents, and instilling trust in that we are doing work on their behalf, and then we're doing the best job and ability to our ability. And then also to coordinate with other senior and elected officials. What else would you do during an activation? Sometimes nothing. And I know that can be not stressful, but like you want to do something, I'm sure, but sometimes you may not need to do anything. Our job is to make sure that you stay as informed as possible, and that we provide you all the information that is needed, and we're also happy to answer any questions that come through. So typically we write our sit reps, we write out situations, what's happening, what we think is going to happen, and then we send it all through. All right, and then coming in the home stretch, your on-scene role. It is important to understand that your presence on scene can be a distraction. You can potentially pull resources away from the response because you're a dignitary. And they want to make sure they treat VIPs right? So it's important that if you feel the need to go on scene, please talk to the incident commander or call or let the ECC know, and we can make sure that happens. And so that it is good for you and good for them. Okay, last thing is I would feel remiss as your emergency manager, since I have a captive audience, if I didn't talk to you about personal preparedness. It is very important that a kid is not going to solve the world, but any preparedness is better than no preparedness. So I, as my commissioners, as my county managers and assistant county managers, I'm asking you to make sure that you have some preparedness in your home, office, and car. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to, I don't want people to overthink it. Any preparedness is better than no preparedness. And then if you do have a kit, when's the last time you looked at it? And now I want to make sure that we talk about water. It's 1 gallon per person per day. This includes hygiene and hydration. First aid kit, you should have batteries and a flashlight. Make sure the batteries are outside the flashlight. Don't keep them stored in the flashlight. You should have multiple denominations of cash and some pantry food. So don't overthink this. Look, I will say SpaghettiOs with Franks are my favorite preparedness kit because I know I can eat them out of the can. Look, during disaster, I'm not worried about my fitness journey at that point, right? Like, I am just trying to survive. And so I know that I can eat SpaghettiOs with Franks out of a can. That is not the time to try Vienna sausages or Spam for the first time. So make sure that you have food that you like and your kids like. If you like picky eaters, figure out what will be good for them. And it doesn't have to be in this like super Connex or super box, bunker under the hill. Use your pantry, use your cupboard as a preparedness kit. This is fine that you have this stuff in your house. It doesn't have to be complicated. And then also don't forget your kids and your pets. That's my dog. And I will say also include a hand crank radio and a NOAA weather radio.
Thank you. Good job.
Wow, look at that. A minute to spare.
And just as a reminder, how can people sign up to TC Alert?
TCalert.org. Thank you.
I think it's important to remember as a team that our most resilient communities are those that are prepared. And so when we're talking about preparedness, we recover much more, we can respond to disasters more effectively if our community is prepared, and we can recover more quickly.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Nice job.
That was great, thank you.
Okay, now moving on. Thank you all so much. Moving on to the budget containment and revenue options follow-up.
2 minutes to spare.
And stay out of the way and get your prepared kit out of storage.
I've got water that's been in there for about 15 years, probably.
At your house.
Maybe.
My wallet at my house.
Yeah, good morning, commissioners, county management team. Summer Miller, budget and finance manager in the commissioner's office. And to the left of me is my amazing senior budget analyst, also known as program managers, Jennifer, Tiff, and Dolly. I have to thank them preemptively for all the work they did to help me pull some of these slides together that are being presented and to answer some of the questions that you had in our last presentation in May. So we'll jump right in. This is our third budget update of 2025. This is leading towards decisions that the board will provide to staff on how best to address revenue issues as well as future fund balance projections. So we're going to lead off with this familiar slide. These are the economic highlights. In April of 2025, we showed that we were 1.7% higher than forecasted at the state level of major general fund revenue collections. Cumulatively, we're still showing at a state level $34.9 million lower than forecasted. Moving on to the next slide, this is an update of your general fund estimated fund balances. I would like to point out that this is without the Amendment 2 additions. The board approved those. The resolution will be formally approved and adopted on June 17th. So I will begin changing this graphic once that formal approval is finished.
What will that do? Just kind of
Sure.
talk to it quickly.
If we're looking at, my apologies, there's something in my eye and it's not my finger. If we're looking at the 24-25 biennial, the salmon and the green are the bars that indicate this current budget cycle. The yellow bars are the 26-27 development. And you'll see that in 2026, we're anticipating in this particular graphic, $2.7 million negative fund balance. With the Amendment 2 additions, it's $6.7 million negative fund balance estimated. In 2027, the graphic is showing you just over $27 million in a negative fund balance. And with the additions, we project that out to be $31 million with the new graphic.
So even with taking a pretty conservative approach in the amendment and only doing the necessities, it's still driving in out years 26, 27, our deficit even further.
That is correct. And we're anticipating, it'll further be compounded when the rest of the collective bargaining agreements are negotiated. So we had a question, and this one I thought was worthy of adding to the slide deck on whether the county should look at one-year budget cycles or biennial budget cycles. I just wanted to bring to your attention that budgeting for 2 years at a time for Washington counties has been in place since 1995. Thurston County is currently in a 2-year appropriations through the adoption of 2 one-year budgets, and that limits the appropriation for each year to a certain limit. In 2016, Resolution 15325 established Thurston County biennial budget beginning in 2017 and 2018. In 2020, the board repealed that decision for fiscal year 2021. And then in 2021, the board reinstated biennial budgeting again for 2022 and forward. So you do have the ability to revert to an annual budget if you so choose by resolution, and that needs to be done at the conclusion of the 24-25 biennium. So what that means is you can direct us
at any time, but the resolution will be coming forward to you on December 16th, I think is the date.
So will this be something that we will discuss during the budget
Well, actually,
process?
jumping ahead to the end of the presentation, we're gonna ask for direction. That's something the board wants us to consider.
Okay.
I think the opportunity a one-year budget gives us is to address 26, and to get our hands around what here you have the pros and cons. Take it away, Summer. Spoiler alert.
So I took the liberty, actually, Jennifer took the liberty of pulling together some pros and cons of biennial budgeting and annual budgeting. And what we landed on was that long-range financial practice is a GFOA best practice, and that is tied to a pro of the biennial budget. The biennial budgeting process is a little more strategic than a one-year plan, and it allows adequate time for the board and leadership to apply the solutions or implement the solutions that you have chosen. Cons are, it can be considered difficult and less adaptable during times of economic uncertainty. We have a little bit lack of flexibility to adapt to changing conditions, and it's a little more complex to manage. Some of the pros of a single year budget is they are easier to manage and implement. There's a little more flexibility to adjust based on our changing circumstances, and our focus will be on immediate needs and priorities. Some of the perceived cons are that it's out of alignment with your long-term planning. It can create risk for future planning and needs, and it does require more detailed budgeting and forecasting. I think, was there something you wanted to add to that?
You did a great job.
Okay, great. Are there any questions on this particular slide? So the board asked us to explore some revenue options and bring forward those which are available to you as a councilmanic decision, and those that would need to go out for voter approval. On the left-hand side, you'll see the councilmanic currently in place, Veterans Assistant Fund levy, road levy shift. That's going from roads to general fund, diverted county road property taxes. On the right-hand side, upper right-hand side, you'll see currently in place, voter approved, is the general fund expense levy, county road levy, conservation futures levy, EMS levy, and then the EMS levy lid lift. I do want to point out that the general fund current expense fund levy is actually something that stays with us. It's the levy lid lift portion that would be voter approved. So your new options that we pulled together for you, councilmanically, would be admissions tax, punch board and pull tab, up to 10% of collection, transportation benefit district sales tax, and a transportation benefit district vehicle license fees. Some of the new options would be the general fund levy lid lift, transportation benefit district sales tax up to 3%, and then a benefit district vehicle license fee up to $100. Those would be voter approved. Yes, and yes.
Go ahead,
No,
Commissioner Grant.
you go ahead.
I was gonna ask, so the revenue options are just specifically tied to the county road fund and general fund, not all of the revenue options that we have?
We were focusing specifically on those items that would touch the general fund, and the road fund would fall in that as well.
Are you interested in having other sources as well? We can come back with that information.
I would like a more holistic view of all the revenue options available to the board, if possible, in the future.
Okay, we can do that.
We'll probably roll that into planning session. That'll be upcoming. We can cover that and then look to strategize on different approaches within these, we'll add a different whole box set.
So I had two nods just to give clear direction to the county manager. Are we okay with having a more holistic approach of having all revenue options?
And just to clarify,
I want to support that.
Yeah, I definitely want to support that too. Just to be clear, you're kind of, I think we're on the same page. I think that's what I was raising my hand for too, is that you want, like I'm thinking, treatment sales tax, and an increase in percent. So all of the other ones, and so that we can then look at, how, anything we can possibly increase as a revenue option. Yeah, okay.
Either voter approved or councilmatic.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Yes, ma'ams and sir, we will do that. Okay, so we gave I'm sorry.
Real quick, and including anything new in the budget. Anything new in as of July 1st, and,
For example, 2015 is one of them, yeah.
yeah. So to make sure that we add in there anything new that would have been implemented in this year's state budget.
I think it'll dovetail.
2015, yeah.
Yeah, it'll dovetail nicely because our lobbyists will be coming after summer recess and providing an overview on everything new in session. And so that research has been done, and so we'll take that and add it to the work session so we can have a comprehensive look. Did you have a question? Sorry.
Yes, so whether it has a general fund nexus or not, right? So a little additional funding for County Road Administration Board going through there to the county.
I think the answer is yes. They want to see everything.
Anything.
I hear what you're asking.
Okay.
But to your point, we'll tie it to what it can be used for, and that'll be like the holistic approach.
Commissioner Munzer?
Just to answer, Jennifer, yeah, because if a huge decision is road fund shift, as an example, so if there's new revenue sources that relate to roads, then that would affect the board's decision on, you know, they're all connected, unfortunately.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
I like this format. This is great.
Thank you. So we put together some revenue details on the items that were listed on the prior slide. Just a little more detail as to what is allowable admissions tax is for charges for admissions to various facilities. It will create unrestricted revenues if the board decides to move forward with that. Punch board and pull tabs is restricted to public safety, the transportation benefit district, and benefit district vehicle license fees on the councilmanic page here are all restricted to transportation improvements. The voter-approved items, the general fund levy lid lift is, and the transportation benefit district and the transportation benefit district vehicle license fees, I'm sorry, those are all, the bottom two are directly tied to transportation improvements. The general fund levy lid lift would add additional revenues into the general fund that would be utilized at the board at your discretion.
Can I just add, for that possible future conversation in terms of revenue, can we also add the potential revenue increase? Like if the board were to pass a punch board and pull tab, like what does
that equate to?
What does that equate to? I think that would be very helpful, especially as we're considering which options to go.
Yeah, what we can do is just run some scenarios to give you some ideas of where it would head, and you can extrapolate from there.
And is that okay with the board?
Great. I would love to see you even just write in, and I really like this format. It's really clean and clear. I'd love to even just see something like that at the end of this, in parentheses, you know, it could be 1% equals this much.
We can do that.
I mean, just very basic, this is how many dollars we would get if we did this.
Totally. Yeah. We can get that together for you. So this is a snippet of information courtesy of our Thurston County Assessor. And it is essentially showing the board a similar exercise to our presentation back in May of what the potential increases to revenues would be into the general fund with a levy lid lift. The graphic is showing you rates of collection at $1.28, $1.10, and $1. And it shows you the increased dollar amount down the side. And so one of the things that the assessor is highlighting here on the bottom half of this graphic is the first year you would essentially experience the full rate of the collection. So if you went to the voters for $1.28, you would receive that full amount, and then each subsequent year there would be a percentage, or the rate of collection would diminish depending on the assessed valuation or what the specific calculations are that the assessor has. We do we are working in partnership with the assessor's office and the assessor directly to pull together a presentation if that's something that the board wishes to see at a future time, so that he can give you all the specifics and field all the questions related to the lid load.
Now understanding that we're gonna come back for a work session to kind of talk about holistic and some dollars, so you can see everything, kind of like a full dashboard of what's available. We'll obviously wait until then to get direction. But I will say that the assessor was extremely helpful in, coming forward in bringing the research his team can do to help the board talk through what the dynamics are and how to move that around. So if the board were to give us direction after the work session, he is available and very interested in supporting the board in their decision-making in that area.
Okay, so, key considerations for voted revenue sources is if it's a directive to staff, we need to determine our filing deadlines, planning backwards for timely receipts, approval requirements. Is it a simple majority, 50+1, or a supermajority? Is there a minimum validation requirement? The ballot measure appearance, like do we want a special election in February or April, or the primary election or general election? And what are the statutory requirements and when will the voters turn out? And then what other measures are on the ballot? We don't want to have anything competing if this is the direction of the board. What was the recent voter support? And what is the cost of each election and how are we going to message that? Are we prepared essentially to put this out to the voters and fail and try again? Just all items for you to consider when you're looking at voter-approved increases to revenue. So I know we have been all anxiously awaiting the state impacts and federal impacts for that matter. This is a list that we have created of our currently known or anticipated state impacts. That would include state legal impact reimbursement, which is the impact fees. The entirety of the funding for state fiscal year 2026 has been eliminated. That impacts Superior Court and the Clerk of Court's offices. Funding is expected to restart July 1st, 2026.
Can I just give a big shout out to Commissioner Menser, because I know he went to bat for this funding, right? The state had basically approved not giving us any of the funding for the 2 years, and Commissioner Menser lobbied quite a bit and was able to get us at least 1 year. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we.
Oh, just real quick, Commissioner Mejia, thank you. But and Representative Dolio was a huge part of that, and my relationship with her and being able to explain to her what it was all about, so that she could then use her tactical knowledge of what was going on and figure out the best way to get that funding restored to us, even though it's delayed by a year. So it's kind of a team effort, but thank you.
And commissioners, we recently met with AOC and our internal departments to talk about this, as well as our lobbyists, knowing that we want to continue to advocate for the county's position and the need for these funds. And so we're lining up an approach that we look forward to updating you on soon.
Thank you. So continuing, the BECA bill, these are reimbursements related to truancy cases. The funding provides for costs associated with processing petitions and case management of truancy. This will impact juvenile court, and funding reductions are expected to be about $300,000. One thing I didn't mention on the one before was that 1.1 million would leave us unfunded, right? So we have 2 items now that will be unfunded. The Blake decision is for reimbursement of extraordinary judicial prosecuting clerk, court administration, and or defense-related costs. We anticipate that the current reimbursement levels will be reduced by about $2.1 million.
Commissioner Grant, go ahead.
And did we hear that we got some of this route yesterday, there'll be some back?
Yeah, there's two different portions I learned, working with Patrick in in his department, is that the Blake decision has funding, through the AOC that goes to, everyone else except for public defense. And public defense's funding from Blake decision comes from the Office of Public Defense. So he received funding request fulfillment, and we are anticipating a significant, that's how it was signaled to us, a significant.
For everyone else.
From the AOC.
And Summer, that fund is reimbursement based on very,
It's not a fund, it's funding that is provided to the county on a reimbursement basis. And then the last three are public health related. We don't have additional information as of yet. We have heard that there will be impacts from the Department of Commerce on housing, Department of Health, and from the Department of DCYF. I guess I didn't need department in front of that, but we're anticipating some figures on what those impacts will look like.
but this creates a climate where we are on standby in several departments, looking at additional revenue loss and what the impacts are to programs, and are working with those departments on going through a process of identifying any and all other revenue sources that could replace funding for programs prior to cutting. Some of this information is coming out of the state with short notice. And so like with public health, they're trying to stay as connected as possible, but also receiving directives as our state receives directives from the federal government as well.
I also want to point out that this is, some of these items will be coming forward in Amendment 3. If the board remembers, we added an Amendment 4. We shifted what would have been Amendment 3's 2025 year-end closeout to Amendment 4, and then we made space for Amendment 3 to capture the state impacts and federal impacts if we have them. If we cannot capture all of the impacts during that amendment cycle, then we will add them to Amendment 4. Any questions on this particular slide? Okay, so.
I do. I'm gonna ask, it would be, I guess I would ask that maybe the next time we see this, we get it in a little different of a format. And I guess, and I'll ask that, for example, I guess, yesterday we had a budget update from Thurston Mason BHO, and there was they'd revert $2.7 million back to Healthcare Authority. That was a requirement this year. And so they showed us where that reversion, had to happen. And so I guess that's kind of, I think it's like with the Blake decision one, I just kind of wanted to see.
A little bit more targeted?
Yeah, or I mean, a little more specific. Because I know, for example, with the Blake decision, I mean, I guess the overall question I had for Healthcare Authority was, or for Thurston Mason, will services be impacted? And the overall answer was no. They were able to cut the $2.7 million from areas of their budget that were not being used, and so, and then they were able to use the new money that was coming in from the new budget, to cover the shortfalls. And so I guess those are the parts where I get a little confused, because I'm like, okay, will we really lose this?
Yeah, we'll dial that in for you.
Yeah,
The amount
that'd be nice.
that's potentially gonna be cut, and is there an impact to actually service or program delivery?
Right.
So that's the process that we'll have staff vet. Is there any other funds that can be adjusted? So we can work that.
Commissioner Munster?
Thank you. In the Blake case, is that even gonna affect us? Because we were so below we were so below the amount of projected reimbursements. And so if they cut 2.1 million off the top, like, is that, even gonna be something we would have reached and therefore affecting us in any way? Or is this a different kind of meeting? Am I confused by?
Thank you for the question. I was looking for the space to answer or provide more context that we receive roughly $2.5 million in funding, and we do not and have not exceeded about $300,000 in reimbursement requests. So the significant cut that's mentioned here should not affect the work that's being done. But when we go to the first listed state legal impact reimbursement, you know, that $1.1 million is being cut for the entire state fiscal year. So we will need to figure out how to backfill that funding from general fund or some other funding area. So the team has been working on that particular item as well as the Becca bill.
Right, so seeing each of those laid out very specifically, because for the Blake decision, it's a wash. I mean, there's a zero impact, actually. And so that's kind of where, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are we good to move forward? Thank you. Okay, so we've been bringing this topic forward. We have brought this topic forward a couple of times. So budget reduction strategy for the board to consider and potentially offer direction to staff. You know, then these are basically taken from the playbook of what the state initially put out at the turn of the year. Budget reduction proposals could include freezing non-essential hiring and spending, restricting equipment purchases, evaluating programs implemented, including the pilots, evaluating programs funded with one-time dollars, discretionary and mandatory programs, and if there's any capacity there to essentially reduce the program's position control. And then there are other considerations of central services charge programs, you know, can they be reduced, or would that drive cost increases in other areas of our central services business design, offsets to savings, overlapping programs, the timing of our savings and statutory changes that we're required to implement. And then also continuing to work to close the gap on general fund reversion. So the last one is harder for us to really kind of hone in if we don't have clear direction on where the board would like us to focus some of our other activities.
Right, which is, leads to the next, so you can go to the next slide. On the budget reduction strategy, it would be our recommendation that we wait until the planning session to have the larger revenue conversation so you can get a sense of all the different options. On the next steps, what we would want the board to consider is a status quo approach to the amendments and budget development, i.e. no general fund addition for positions reclasses with a negative impact of the general fund. That helps give some guidance to the budget team on how they're preparing things, and also starts to cap the issue so that it's not continuing to grow until you have a chance to look at all the different revenue options and see how much do those actually close the gap for the ongoing operational deficit that we have.
Commissioner Fournier?
Okay, just thinking about next steps. So like on the next steps, you know, item 1, I think that would involve some discussion. Item 3 would, you know, we're moving that out to have a greater kind of snippet on that. Item 2, I would want to suggest moving forward on, and like, but should we do that in some type of like resolution to be adopted by the whole council that encompasses kind of the budget reduction strategies and next steps, item number 2, and then we can all kind of adopt, you know, a way forward and give staff like very clear direction. That would be my suggestion.
I think we have 2 things at play here. We have the finishing, there's going to be another 2 amendments for this year.
Yes.
And it is our recommendation that we have a status quo approach to those two additional amendments, meaning that we're not adding positions or reclasses that have a impact on the general fund. What that does is it also streamlines the amount of work and research that the staff have to do in that process, because it wouldn't be our recommendation that we add to the ongoing operational deficit. The process on the negative for the build for 26-27, I think that part of the conversation, you need to first see all the different revenue options that you have available to you and what direction you're going to give, so that we can come back and say, if the hole is this big and you decided to adjust revenue this much, here's the new hole and here's how it's going to impact the different general fund departments.
Okay, I don't want to just do a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing is what I'm getting at. I want to, try and, I'm hoping we can find something that we can all adopt and get behind and give clear direction on. So what I'm saying is, should we have some type of resolution that the commission can adopt as a clear policy that, this speaks to the next step? And so I didn't, I don't want to just do a, kind of the wishy-washy thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing, because I want to get something in writing that says this is what we're doing moving forward.
Commissioner Fournier, can I ask some clarification? Are you talking just about the budget amendments similar to what the county manager is, or are you talking about?
I'm talking about where it's, the budget reduction strategy, just the general strategy where it says, hey, we want to, freeze non-essential hiring and spending. We want position control. Like, we've been talking about wanting to do those things. And, if we're going to do those things, some of those are hard discussions. So I would want to see us get it clearly, set in, some type of resolution that the executive can take and run with.
So do you want to, I'm just trying to get to kind of the core, the recommendation from the county manager, and please correct me if I'm not, is to wait until after the planning session to have a conversation, revenue options, then to have the discussion about the budget reduction strategies. Are you recommending that staff approach or staff draft a resolution now before we have that planning session?
I mean, I would see that independent of the revenue discussion, kind of, because I mean, those budget control strategies need to, I think, occur.
Well, I think that as part of our recommendation is to finish out this year with what we're calling that status quo approach, which is no continued increase besides maintenance level increase to the general fund. Position reclasses and position adds.
Okay, Summer, I saw your hand. Oh, no, okay.
So the build for 26, or 26-27, based on, I mean, we can have that discussion or not, because we're over time, we can, Yeah. But what we're looking at is, we are pretty early in these discussions, but time is getting short. If we're going to do a 2-year biennial work, they need to know that fairly soon so they can start building that out. And to finish this year, you're going to want to entertain increases to the general fund, then it would be good for us to know that now as well, or no increases to the general fund. It would be good for us to know that as well.
Thank you. I just want to make sure, does anyone have a hard stop where they have to attend something? Okay, so we'll go ahead and lead a little bit into, Commissioner Menzer, go ahead, sir.
I was going to speak on the biennial question, if that's appropriate at this time.
I think that's, yeah, go ahead.
So I've been thinking a lot about this. Obviously, we did this merry-go-round before, as Summer laid out, and there's some real differences here that I think are pertinent, and I want to just outline. So hopefully we would all agree that in a kind of a static world, the biennial budget is better. I mean, it's a generally accepted accounting practice, and it's how it's done by sophisticated budgeters. So the question is there a valid reason to do something different this year? The first thing I would say is that in COVID was weird. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know how long it would last. We didn't know if it was a V or a U recovery. So there really was an uncertainty factor that was unique. And that's not true here. This is like a general economic cycle, flattening of revenue. I mean, we see what's going on here. We're not as surprised by or mystified by what exactly is happening. Number one. Number two, the political difficulty. I mean, the structural gap we have is going to require decisions that are not one-year decisions, right? Like, we're not going to solve this in 1 year and then pivot to something else. Like, we know that the decisions that need to be made are medium term at best. So, you know, the idea that there's some value to making 1 year decision and then we might do something radically different a year later, I don't see that as a reality. Third, something that the newer board members may not remember, and it may not be important to you, but it was at the time, was that one of the arguments for going to the single year budget and with every intent of going back to a 2-year budget was to get the budget cycle off the commissioner election cycle. That was strongly argued by many elected officials, and I frankly agreed with that, and I think the board, Commissioner Edwards did, and I think Commissioner Mejia too, but in any case, that was a big conversation point, and, you know, if we do a 1 year budget and then we go back to a 2-year, again, then we're back to the same. We've undone the value that we created by going to 1 year budget and flipping so that commissioners aren't mixed up with grandstanding in their campaigns while trying to make hard budget decisions. So anyway, that's kind of my thinking about why we should stick with our biennial process.
You reminded me about the election cycle, and I think, yeah, thank you for that reminder, Commissioner Munster.
I would agree with our chair's viewpoint of our economic condition. This is not a 1 year situation. We can show in the out years that, you know, revenue is flat right now, but expenses because of inflation are up. And so I think what he's had to say from as you look out from a projection standpoint is pretty accurate.
Commissioner Grant, go ahead.
So I'm just gonna flat out ask this question of Summer, you know, coming from a former budget chief, you know, thinking of you and your team, what would make, I mean, I'm understanding the environment that you guys have had to come into and that you're working through, and you're doing a great job and working through all of this documentation. I just want to know, would going to a 1 year budget help you?
That's a tricky question.
Is it going to make things easier for you or not? I mean,
The answer should be yes, but it's not yes, right? Because the way that budgeting has occurred in the county is, even if there are rules and parameters on what is allowable during a amendment cycle, the rules aren't necessarily adhered to by all who are submitting requests. So the level of work that our team puts into a midterm adjustment, it's the same.
I think that's a great question, and I really appreciate, Commissioner Grant, you considering staff's disposition on this, because it's important. I think to what Summer said is creating clear guidelines as to what the board will and won't entertain as we get into different budget cycles is probably more powerful than an annual or biannual. Because what has happened is, even though we do a 2 year budget, we're doing the same amount of work throughout the different cycles because of the and it's no fault to the board, but the inconsistency in what's being submitted. So creating consistency through, as Commissioner Fournier said, a kind of budget policy that then outlines how we're going to do that, and then the board adhering to it, and that allows Summer and me to, when we provide the directions to departments, it can be very clear, and then you know what's coming before you, either follows the rules or not.
Thank you.
So that we can eventually get to a place where we're taking advantage of the biannual budget.
Okay, so, do commissioners want to direct staff on either an annual or biannual?
I do want to say if there's a concern about throwing it off cycle from commissioners' elections, I don't think you're limited to one annual budget cycle. I think you can commit to 2 1-years or just a biennial. So we are happy to take any direction.
So I'm leaning towards the biennial as well. And I was the one who recommended an annual to start off with, but, just as I've been kind of stewing on this too of like, what are we gonna do? And, but I'm hearing some commissioners say they're not ready, and I think that there was a lot of information that was given today, so I'm gonna make a recommendation that maybe we come back on another date to give direction to staff, to allow maybe commissioners a week to kind of
No problem.
absorb this information we've heard today, and then commissioners can come in and have this conversation. That's just,
Sure.
I'm happy to make that a motion, but I just kind of want to feel how everyone is feeling.
I like that.
I think that sounds fair.
That's fine with me.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we come back whenever staff is available and give the commissioner some time to touch base with staff on the next steps highlighted in this. Well, I think we already provided direction on staff for the revenue options. We're gonna have a planning session on that, so I'll just say for the budget development direction and for the board to adopt a status quo approach to amendments and budget development or not.
Yeah, we can bring that after summer recess. And I mean, that would be,
After summer recess?
yeah, that'd be the time that we can do that and then jump into the July planning session and have the broader conversation about all the revenue. I think we still have time, and we can also research, to Commissioner Fournier's point, any language around a policy that kind of starts to frame that in for board consideration and discussion. We know these are weighty matters, and so we're not trying to push. I think our approach of getting this to you early is paying off, so that we're not making these decisions in the fall and winter when we have to also decide on the budget situation and making those operational decisions.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll be coming back in July for these. Any questions, comments?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Well, I do want to make everyone aware that we have called budgets scheduled the first day back in session, so July 14th, and we are opening the the biennial budget development cycle at that time. It'll be opened on the evening of the 15th. So we will then proceed as if we're going to be building a biennial budget until we hear something different.
Yeah, the status quo right now, because the board hasn't changed, any decision to change, and that'll be the framework that we start to initiate. And then our lobbyist will be here next week. I'm sorry, I got the date wrong. So she'll be able to give you an update on session and start the conversation about additional revenues that we received. Josh and I alerted her to that's a priority in the conversation, so she has some comments on that.
Commissioner Klaus?
Thank you. So I'll say I'm pleased with the decision to postpone the direction on these items until we have more information. As far as the second point about adopting a status quo approach to amendments and budget development, I know we agreed on a status quo approach for the current amendment that we're looking at, but there are a couple questions I would like to consider as we think about whether or not to implement that approach moving forward. And one question is, have alternative scenarios, which I know probably not at this point. I would like the alternative scenarios to be considered regarding strategic reductions versus blanket freezes and blanket status quo approaches, especially considering the uncertainty at the federal and state level. I know we're not facing, at this point, a status quo socio-political landscape. We're facing unprecedented times, and I think we need to take that into consideration as we think about maintaining a status quo approach to the budget. I also am curious to know if peer jurisdictions have maybe lessons or best practices we can integrate to improve our fiscal agility in Thurston County. I know there are jurisdictions regionally that are facing similar issues, so I'm wondering how other jurisdictions have approached this. And then if we do decide on a status quo approach, how will we ensure ongoing transparency on budget impacts, and how frequently will these be reported to the board? So I guess I would like a summary of what the budget process would look like if we decided to maintain status quo approach.
Those are great questions, Commissioner Klaus. What I would say is, and we can definitely do the research and bring some information back. We're actually looking at two different components. Finishing this year, and that's primarily where the status quo recommendation comes into play, so we don't make the deficit any larger. And then as part of this conversation in July or August, we'll be coming back with an overview of and seeking the board's direction on what to do with the ongoing deficit. A list of the general fund departments and the general fund impact, and then how basically the hole that we have in our budget, and how are we going to fill that hole with cuts. We haven't planned that out. I mean, we have a sense of it, but we'll be coming and having a conversation and getting direction from you. So we don't have like a one size fits all, because every department's going to be impacted differently. And based on the conversation we have about revenue and different options, to what Commissioner Menser mentioned, even about the road fund shift, there will be some conversations. If you do this, then this will mean this, and we'll look forward to doing that in a lot of detail with all of you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Which will also include operational impacts, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been the practice in the past as well. Commissioner.
And I think, just to kind of wrap this up, that, for me, and it was me under my breath saying, I'm just not ready, I just need to see all of those revenue options, and that's, I have to have that full picture, I think that it's very hard for me to set policy goals or make decisions without strategic. Like, we haven't kind of finalized, like, what are the budget is our piece of policy that as commissioners, we are supposed to, it's the thing that we tell the world that we're doing, right? That it's the number one thing that drives our operations. And so for me, it's really important and that we are thinking critically about, when the decisions that we're making for next year's. I'm not talking about the rest of this year's. I'm just talking about those ones in the planning session. And so I'm just really wanting us to make sure that we aren't boxing ourselves in, because we have a lot of things that we want to get done next year and the year after that around, and we've been talking about that in our goal setting. And so I just want us to be thinking about that, that, we can't have status quo and, have a new crisis care center and have all of these other really cool things that are, happening that we all have down the pike. And so anyway, that's kind of where my brain is going. But anyway, I'm looking forward to the discussions that we'll have. And I just want to tell this budget staff again that this work that you guys have been doing has been phenomenal. Just watching you guys put out it in different ways so that we can see it in different ways has been really great. And I think you're just really digging in, and I appreciate it. It's been great work.
Thanks for the acknowledgement, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've reached, Jennifer, go ahead.
Commissioner Klaus, you asked about what other jurisdictions are doing. I just read an article recently about Kitsap County commissioners and some changes, some things that they've put in place. And so I don't know if you have contacts there, but that might be an opportunity to reach out to maybe the commissioners at Kitsap County. Okay. Because they just made some decisions.
And some of the ones that, the reduction strategies that they're following are the same ones that are listed here. And
we know City of Olympia, there was an article about hiring freezes and spending freezes.
That's interesting, because I just heard that Olympia brought all of their staff up to market rate, even though it's gonna be a 1 million hit next year to their general fund, which I thought was really interesting. That they did an analysis on that and then decided to bring every staff up to market rate despite the budget cuts that they're facing.
Yeah, that's though after they cut 25 positions from their budget.
Okay.
I think there are different parts of, different things we're talking about, though. This is, I think we're talking about just in budget development. What is the policy gonna be in our budget development process versus they're just different procedures, processes.
I would also, when we're looking at other jurisdictions, I guess just my advice is looking at other counties, not cities, just because we are funded differently and cities do have way more revenue options available than counties do, and so,
And they also have operational control over almost all their departments.
yeah, that's enough. Okay, 12:20, anything else before, yeah, there's commissioner items. Does anyone have a commissioner item? Nope.
I will for next week. We'll just put it on for next week.
Okay, so we're adjourned. Thank you.